Yeah, I come from the East End of London, East Ham, sort of lived in a 2 up, 2 down.
Tiki Donovan, seen training here, took up karate as a teenager.
Fighting then, it was sort of a common thing in the East End, so it was, my mother didn't want me to do it, but I wanted to learn to protect myself.
As karate entered popular culture, clubs began to spring up across the country.
When I first started going to the club in Clapham Common, it'd be packed, and the Japanese would have free fighting, and next week you go, it was half empty, because people wanted to do the moves, but they didn't want to get up and fight. But coming from the East End, we just loved the fighting side of it.
As a Glaswegian, I've always been very interested in fighting, purely for survival reasons. However, I think karate gave opportunities for the young people of the time to do something different from the sort of rather grey surroundings.
Most of my friends were taking the mickey out of me, you know, as I went in the wimpy bar, they was going, oh, here comes Tiki, chop, chop. I just couldn't get enough of it. I mean, I pulled every muscle I think I know. I pulled my hamstrings, pulled everything, you know, with the stretching and the kicking, but I just loved every minute of him.
Been dazed and confused for so long, it's not true. Wanted a woman, never bargained for you.
Karate's tough reputation didn't put off women either.
This is the other side of Pauline Fuller. Housewife, mother, and Europe's top woman karate expert. Down at the gym, Pauline sheds her feminine qualities along with her blouse and skirt, and becomes 5'0" of blonde ferocity.
Well, I was the first woman in England to do karate. I used to be scared stiff, I used to hide and creep out when the lesson started. But I thought, well, here goes, so I took it up.
For the next 10 years, karate was the martial art of choice, but its deadly image would eventually prove unpalatable to the media.
We've all heard of judo, but here in Tokyo, there is another form of self-defense in which Japan leads the world. It's called karate. It's a method by which a hand, a fist, can be more deadly than any kosh, and a Japanese can kill at one blow by striking 7 vulnerable points of the body. Now, when you've learned how to kill people with one blow, what are you going to do with it?
I don't know. I was going to tell the other people in England about it, but I'll have to think it over, I think.
Already with an image problem, karate was about to be struck a heavy blow.
We had a major problem occur, 67 I think it was. A kitchen hand called Anthony Creamer had bought a book called What is Karate by Masatatsu Yama. It's quite a violent form of the art. And he fell out with one of the waiters in an establishment he worked at. And apparently within 3 seconds, he'd killed the man stone dead. And quite rightly, he was put away for it. But the fallout was very bad. The judge in the court said something in the region of, I am so appalled at what I've heard here that I think this, the words he used was, vicious and evil skill should be banned in this country.
Self-taught Anthony Creamer had broken the golden rule that martial arts should only be used for self-defense. Their moral and ethical foundation was publicly called into question. But martial arts were also being challenged from within by those who wanted to move them into a new arena. By the 1960s, martial arts had begun to leave their traditional roots behind and turn into pure sports. Judo was the first to change. Old-school self-defense took a backseat to competition. For the first time, British martial artists began looking to the West for inspiration.
You look to other sports, you see what other sports are doing, you see what boxing is doing, you see what wrestling's doing, all Olympic sports, and of course you want to join them.
The father of British judo, Gunji Koizumi, had always tried to prevent this transition into a solely sporting pursuit.
It was peculiar. Koizumi didn't believe in sport judo, and the reason he didn't like sport judo was because he thought it produced conceited individuals whose only focus was on winning. That was it.
My understanding is that Koizumi really saw judo very much as this intellectual and moral education, and much less so as a sport.
But the process of turning judo into a sport had become unstoppable. Sid Hoare represented Britain in the first Olympics to feature judo, Tokyo, 1964.
You go in the stadium and you're looking at all these thousands of people all waving flags and shouting and screaming. You're on a big, open field, and then the name's called out, and then you go on the mat, and there's somebody on the far side walking on, and you may know him, you may not. You know, I wonder what this one's going to be like. You know,
scary. It's very scary to step on a mat and face your opponent and look at them in the eye.
Once you go on the mat, you're handcuffed to someone. It's like you're being handcuffed to a running machine. You've just got to keep going. You can't, there's no ball to pass to anyone else. It just keeps happening to you. And this is often terrifying, which is always very interesting.
You can win by throwing someone flat on their back, by getting a submission from a lock on the elbow or from a strangle.
For British judo fighters, the world stage was a chance to take on the best, and the best were the Japanese.
In the early days, the Japanese were completely preeminent. I mean, nobody could beat them. And then emerged a very big Dutchman called Anton Heesink, who was very large and very powerful and very, very good at judo.
Heesink's goals at the 61 World Championships and the 64 Tokyo Olympics opened the floodgates. The Japanese were no longer unbeatable, and the chance for British competitors had arrived.
This was a kind of cataclysmic moment in the history of international judo, you know, and an astonishing achievement. Japan was just devastated by this loss. I mean, people weeping in the streets.
The fact that Heesink won really allowed Westerners to really have a renewed sense of self-belief about their ability to compete with the Japanese. I think prior to Heesink, there was certainly a sense that if you drew a Japanese, you probably were going to lose.
A couple of years later on, there were Russians winning world championships, there were French winning world championships, there were Brits winning world championships, you know, all coming in at different times.
For women, the development of competitive judo was a slow journey that began in the West. But for Britain, it was worth the wait.
Women's judo was quite late getting started. Indeed, the first contests were conducted behind a curtain in some leisure centre because it was felt that the public wasn't quite ready to cope with the sight of women on the mat. But I think that's kind of changed.
106-pound final, 48 kilos, Jane Bridge of Great Britain against Anna Di Novellis of Italy. Bridge wearing 1.7, Anna wearing 1.10. On the back of her gi.
Our early women's teams used to beat the Japanese all the time. And the first women's world champion was a Brit.
Jane Bridge of Great Britain, the gold medal winner in the 106-pound category.
And that win gave Jane Bridge Britain's first ever gold medal in World Championship Judo. Needing any world-level competition, not even Brian Jacks, Dave Starbrook, Keith Renfrey or Neil Adams have achieved that.
Judo club members and friends also turned out to welcome her back after a competition in which she not only became the world champion at her weight, but also the award which carried the grand inscription, Best Stylist on Earth. After the official welcome, the band led a procession through the streets of the town to her parents' chip shop. There, her tearful granny had laid on a fish and chip supper, something Jane normally doesn't touch when she's in training.
Karate followed a similar trajectory. It became something Britain excelled at. At first, there were barely any competitions outside Japan.
When karate first come in, it was just traditional. You know, it was a self-defense. People went to learn karate to protect themselves. Judo was already a sport then.
In the early days, the Japanese dominated the competition scene. But in a few short years, British teams were mounting a credible challenge.
When we first started fighting the Japanese, we could only mimic them. So we tried to fight the same way as they did. And they were faster and more suppler than us. And they was beating us every time. As it went on, we started developing our way of fighting. We started using our strength and our reach. And we moved. The Japanese fought in a very straight line because they were very traditional. We started moving from side to side and bouncing around more like boxing.
By evolving their style, the British were able to break through in 1975, finally beating the Japanese at their own game. And the victories kept coming.
We won in 82 in Taiwan. Then we won in 84 in Holland. Then we won again in 86 in Australia, then 88 in Egypt, and then 1990 in Mexico. Great Britain won the World Championships 5 times in succession, which no other country has ever done, and which I'm pleased to say I got the OBE off the Queen for.
Even the Japanese couldn't achieve what the British teams had. But in spite of giant-killing sporting success, martial arts were always more popular with fellow practitioners than the general public.